Hi everybody, this is a video about biofilm disruptors. Someone messaged me with a question recently, and the gist of it was they're working with a biofilm disruptor and they're wondering whether certain nutrients are safe to take alongside that biofilm disruptor. So as per usual, I can't give medical advice over social media. Nothing that I'm saying in this video should be construed as medical advice. It's for informational purposes only, and please talk to your doctor if you need medical advice, or another clinician if you need medical advice. But speaking about this topic generally, it's a really good question. And at the end of the day, not all biofilm disruptors are created equal. I've posted videos on this and spoken about in other videos about how there are phase 1 and phase 2 biofilm disruptors. Phase 2 biofilms are much more difficult to break down and get rid of than phase 1 biofilm disruptors. So certain things that are good at breaking down biofilms, well, we need to know, is it a phase 1 or a phase 2 biofilm? So just asking about biofilms in general, it's like, well, or asking about biofilm disruptors in general, well, what's the biofilm in question? When it comes to some of the common biofilm disruptors, when I'm thinking about, what types of things are safe to work with those biofilm disruptors or not, I'm thinking about what is the mechanism of action by which they're working and what kind of things do they typically interact with. So for example, certain enzymes like nattokinase or stratopeptidase, they can break down phase 1 biofilms, i.e. they're weak biofilm disruptors. And generally, I don't want to combine anything with those because if I have other things in the system at the same time, there's always the possibility that the enzyme might be working on that thing as well. Now, specifically things that have a protein content to them. So I would personally, for my patients, recommend they take those away from food. But if they're taking them at the same time as, like a mineral supplement or something like that, it probably doesn't really matter because a proteolytic enzyme like nattokinase or stratopeptidase or lumbrokinase is not going to break down those minerals, to my understanding. If it's something like, say, black cumin seed, it has antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties to it. Is that going to interact with, a multivitamin? Is that going to interact with other herbs? Probably not. I don't think those things would, interact with one another, typically, or kind of interfere with one another's activity. Look at something like silver. Silver is a phase 2 biofilm disruptor, so quite a strong biofilm disruptor. There's always the $1,000,000 question of, is that silver actually going to get to where the biofilms are? Systemic biofilms, yeah, silver is well absorbed. That could be really useful. Gut biofilms, probably not so useful because silver is too darn well absorbed and gets into the bloodstream and doesn't linger in the gut. But if a patient's on silver and, say, minerals, if a patient's on silver and vitamins, if a patient's on silver and, different antimicrobial herbs, I'm generally speaking not too worried that their activity is going to interfere with one another. Now you bring in something like another phase 2 biofilm disruptor, like say DMSA or DMPS, well, that's a different kettle of fish because those biofilm disruptors are heavy metal chelators, but also mineral chelators. And in the event, those chelators, they prefer to bind up heavy metals, and that's why they can break down biofilms, because phase 2 biofilms have heavy metals incorporated into their structure. But in the absence of heavy metals to bind, those biofilm disruptors, DMSA and DMPS, will bind up, and EDTA for that matter, they're all biofilm disruptors, they will bind up healthy minerals if that's all that's available. So if a patient of mine said, oh, can I take my, multi-nutrient or, eat close to my, biofilm disruptor, I'd say, well, you really probably shouldn't, because as that biofilm disruptors in the stomach, along with, say their mineral complex or their healthy, paleo diet-esque dinner or whatnot, well, the chelator is going to be looking for something to bind to, and unless there's a bunch of heavy metal in the food or the supplements been contaminated with heavy metals, then there isn't really going to be any heavy metal to bind. There's just going to be minerals to bind, and so that chelator is going to just unfortunately feel really unfulfilled, saying like, I wanted to bind mercury, I wanted to bind lead, but all I have are these minerals to bind, and so it's going to bind whatever's at hand. Whereas if that chelator is taken on an empty stomach, then away from supplements, away from other medications and things like that, it's not going to have anything to bind up in the stomach. It's going to get into the intestines. It's going to be absorbed systemically, and it's going to start binding up things that we, like the biofilms that we want to bind up. Now, something like DMSA has a relatively poor gastrointestinal absorption, so it can actually work really well for gut biofilms because, to my understanding, only up to 20% of it's actually absorbed in the first place. That's a little bit of an exception there for the gut, but it just really depends on the biofilm disruptor in terms of what can it be safely combined with. So for something like that, you really need to talk to your clinician about what's the biofilm disruptor, what's safe to combine it with, and whatnot. But there's not just a hard and fast rule across the board across all types of biofilms. So thank you for the question. Always love talking about biofilms. It's a really interesting, fascinating topic. Quite frankly, a lot of folks who are suffering from complex chronic illness, they don't know about biofilms. A lot of them do, but in my experience, a lot of them don't. And that's oftentimes because their clinicians don't know about them either, because unfortunately, biofilms in this respect or this regard are not discussed, not taught in medical school, naturopathic medical school, etc. And so it's just a really under-recognized issue, especially in the realm of complex chronic illness. So I will leave it there for now. If anybody has any questions about this topic or anything else, please post in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer as soon as I can.